Many of us think wars are won with gunpowder, bullets, and the sound of cannons. But the truth is, some of the most decisive wars in history weren't fought on battlefields, but around tables. And the weapons weren't tanks or artillery shells. They were printing presses, interest rates, exchange rates, and gold reserves. It may sound strange, but sometimes it wasn't a general who determined the fate of an empire. It was a currency. That's why currency wars have always felt like hidden world history to us. Because once you start to see them, you begin to understand how everything is connected. The logic of currency wars is actually simple, using money like a sword. Deliberately weakening a currency to support foreign trade, flooding markets with cheap credit, or stacking gold in the vault to squeeze your rivals. Seems like a clever move, right? But history tells us this game wounds both sides. It's like a fatal weapon. You strike your enemy, but if the wind turns, the poison blows back at you too. One of the first and most powerful examples in modern history came during the Great Depression. After the massive stock market crash of 1929, nations in desperation began using foreign exchange as their most dangerous weapon. The United Kingdom left the gold standard in 1931, and the pound dropped sharply. After that, the United States also reduced the dollar's gold content in 1933. France, Italy, Japan, everyone started competing to drive their currencies lower. And the result? Trade didn't recover. People became poorer, tensions grew, and this economic pressure echoed through the darkness of the era, becoming one of the signals of the coming storm that would eventually lead toward World War II. But the story didn't start in the 1930s. The roots go far deeper. For instance, in the Roman Empire. Back then, power depended on the credibility of the silver denarius. But emperors, facing rising war costs, began slowly reducing the silver content of their coins. At first the difference was small, but over time the purity was stretched to nearly nothing. And naturally inflation began to devour the Roman economy from within. The so-called barbarians at the gates, that was the finale. But the sabotage, it had already started inside the system itself. Then came Bretton Woods, an entirely different stage. In 1944, the world was trying to rebuild a new financial system from the ashes of war. The dollar was fixed to gold, and other currencies were fixed to the dollar. It created trust, yes, but it also created new power. That power was obvious during the era of Richard Nixon. In 1971, he closed the gold window, cutting the dollar away from gold. No one heard a declaration of war. But the global financial system collapsed overnight. Exchange rates were now floating freely, and the markets had entered a brand new era of currency warfare. When we reach the 1980s, this is where I always say, silent but brutal, because the 1985 Plaza Accord looked like a classic summit agreement, but its impact was like a financial missile. The value of the Japanese yen doubled in just 2 years. Exports became expensive, the asset bubble grew, and by the 1990s it exploded. The United States never fired a shot. It just used the markets as artillery. And then, 1997. This is why another one of my favorite chapters is the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Because a single currency's fall shook entire countries like a string of dominoes. Thailand's baht collapsed. The crisis spread across the region. People didn't feel the crash in stock charts. They felt it in their wallets. And today? It sometimes feels like another chapter is being written. This is what economists occasionally call currency war 4.0. The weapons now aren't minted coins or printing machines. They're digital liquidity, sanctions, interest rate strategy, and alternative payment networks. The world watches a chess match between two giants, the Federal Reserve and the People's Bank of China making their moves, while emerging and weaker economies simply try to breathe between the waves. And the interesting thing is this: we don't see it as a war in real time, because the headlines don't say the war has begun. Instead, we see things like interest rates were cut, currency reshaped, reserves strengthened. But behind the scenes, the consequences are real. Closed factories, disappearing savings, skyrocketing costs of living. The lesson I take from this is simple. Money was never neutral in history. Sometimes it built empires, sometimes it destroyed them. In these wars, you don't have to be a soldier, but noticing the game. That moves you from spectator to someone who understands the battlefield. If you love financial history, if realizing that currencies move empires excites you, I think we should tell more stories like this together. Because the echoes that once rumbled across battlefields now wander silently inside banknotes. Trust me, once you start to see it, you